I'm Neil Marshall. I'm the writer, director, and editor of Dog Soldiers, as well as a few other films like The Descent, Centurion, Doomsday, and most recently a movie called The Lair, which is coming out next year. It could be a very long story because it took 6 years to from script to screen. I first came up with the idea of soldiers versus werewolves as a movie concept back in 1995, and it took another 6 years to finally get the money to make it. But during that time, I was writing the script again and again and again, and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, and trying to get cast attached. I think we ended up filming something like the 12th draft. It was worth waiting, and because the 12th draft is way better than the first draft. Needed to figure out how we were going to get it made, and one of the things we did was we brought on board another producer called Christopher Figg, who had in the 80s had made Hellraiser, which was like kind of one of the more notable horror films prior to us. There was sort of a dead zone of horror films in the UK between the end of Hammer and sort of the new wave in the early 2000s that Dog Soldiers was part of. And one of the only notable ones between all that was Hellraiser in the 80s. We started talking to cast. Quite early on, I approached Sean Pertwee because I wanted to work with him. I knew Paul Anderson, who'd worked with him on Event Horizon and stuff. So we didn't have any money. So Sean had said, if it helps, use my name, please. And, and I'll be there when you've got the money together. Little did he know it was something like 3 years later that we eventually went back and said, hey, we've got the money. And he's like, all right, let's do the movie now. I wanted it to be both very commercial, but also kind of very British. And not just because obviously I'm from Newcastle. So I wanted to hear some northern twang in some of the accents. So I wanted to have some Geordies in there, and just mix up the north and the south a bit, because we got Kev from Scotland, we've got, Sean from London, we've got, and everybody in between, just to sort of just make it a more diverse, interesting mix of accents and language choices and things like that. I was very much making it for myself, but also for like people coming home after the pub on a Friday night would like put in this movie and appreciate it. I wanted to really make them feel realistic as a bunch of squaddies. And I don't think that many films up until that point had ever achieved that. I was really annoyed by 28 Days Later, which amazing film, but like the soldiers had all turned into kind of psychopathic rapists in a matter of a month. I thought that was not entirely authentic, and didn't do the soldiers any favors. And I thought, I want to be more authentic about who these guys are. My grandfather fought in the Battle of the Somme, and my dad was in the army, so I kind of grew up with tales of gallows humor and trench humor and such like. And I really wanted to capture that and do them justice, I suppose. It was funny seeing, like Darren and Sean yesterday. It's just how close they are to their characters. It's very easy to see why I cast Darren as Spoon, because he, a name change and a few other, beats or whatever, but he is Spoon. He embodies that character so much. It's just, it's a process and just trying to create a mixed bunch, really, that each one would be individual. Well, I always wanted them to be walk around on two legs. I always felt that the werewolves were scarier when they were slightly more human. A friend of mine did a sketch very early on. A sound recorder's friend of mine, who turned out to be a great artist, did the sketch of this very elegant, almost like feminine looking werewolf, just absolutely beautiful. And I was like, okay, this has captured something that's connected to like real wolves, who are quite sort of slender and beautiful looking. I was like, can we capture some kind of beauty in these creatures as well? And so that was the plan. And I hired dancers to be in the suits to give them some kind of elegance to the movements. But then we put them on stilts and took away their vision, and all that went out the window, and they were staggering around blindly and falling over all the time. But the intention was there. So all of these things kind of came together like a hybrid of a real wolf and a human. The one that stands out more than anything is probably the scene where Sean is being stuck together with glue, when his intestines have been put back in and stuck together with glue. And he approached me beforehand and said, look, would it be okay if I just had a couple of drinks just to loosen up a little bit for the scene? And it was a controlled environment, so I said, yeah, go for it. I trusted him fully at this point. So he had I don't know what he drank, but he had a little bit to drink, so he was tipsy when he did the scene. But it enabled him to just be authentic, because there's nothing worse than a really bad fake drunk. And then he kind of improvised lines like sausages, which has become this immortal line. He improvised that, and I was like, oh, that's just too good. I'm going to keep that in. Within reason, absolutely. I think if you can do that, and that's another reason to kind of use practical effects, because you have the creatures in the room with the actors, and accidents happen, or things just occur naturally that will take people by surprise, and you get reactions, you get authentic reactions that you would never get if it's a CG creature. So things are a little bit less controlled and contrived, I think. And I really like that, those happy accidents that suddenly like make your movie. We were very lucky on Dog Soldiers and on Descent that we got to film both of these films like essentially in story order. And the way that the Descent worked was because we were taking this journey through the caves and we never went to the same cave twice. It made sense that we would just shoot it in story order because we had to adapt certain sets and things like that. I don't know when it occurred to me, but it was the idea of like, since we're not going to encounter the creatures in the story until, nearly half the way through, what if I don't let them see what the designs look like? I certainly don't let them see what the makeup looks like. I didn't even let them meet the actors who were playing the creatures. We kept them all separate. It really built up a sense of anticipation with the girls, that they were like, they knew something was coming. They'd read the script, they knew these creatures were coming, but they had no idea what to expect. And I thought, what the hell, let's just take this to its logical conclusion. And the scene where they first encounter them, what if we, literally like we turned off all the lights, walked the creature into the set, and then rolled cameras with the infrared camera. And unfortunately, their first reaction to seeing it was not, they immediately snapped out of character, screamed, and ran out of the set. So that, unfortunately, it was a grand experiment, but that take became unusable. And then we ended up doing, I think it was like 4 takes. And on the first few, I had Craig standing behind Alex, and he was kind of like reaching for her shoulder. And there's something about it just didn't work. It was like, it looked comedic, it looked bizarre. So I said, Craig, what if you just stand there, like listening? If you just stand there with your head slightly tilted, and you're just standing there listening. And we did that one. It was immediately, I was like, oh God, that's creepy. That's really bizarre. And so that's the one that went in the film. But yeah, but it was well worth it once, eventually once you turn on all the lights and the girls saw that the creatures were really just a bunch of naked Geordies in makeup and covered in KY jelly and stuff like that. It's like, it's amazing what you can do with lighting and camera moves and things like that. I mean, I had the option then, when we made it in 2002, it was like 10 years after Jurassic Park. So the CGI was there. A few years before we made our film, there was another movie called American Werewolf in Paris came out, and they did a fully CG werewolf, and it looked awful. And it dated like immediately, and it just didn't stand up to test. The camera, the eye. But you look at Dog Soldiers now, and it hasn't changed a bit, and it's like it's still as realistic as it ever looked, if it ever did. But it's the same. But the same with films like American Werewolf in London or Alien or The Thing. All these films that have practical effects haven't aged, and yet films that have been made like only 10 years ago or less with CG suddenly look dated very quickly because the CG's improved so much over the years. CG is an incredible tool, and it's useful to enhance certain things. Like, so on the new movie, The Lair, we've had practical creatures, but in order to make them do certain things that just physically couldn't be done, like we wanted their mouths to open super wide, then we used CG to enhance that. But it's still a realistic, practical creature. I honestly, I wish I had £1 for every time somebody asked me if I was going to make a Dog Soldiers sequel. I really do. I think I'd be a millionaire by now. And as I said at the convention this weekend, I can neither confirm or deny anything. So specifically saw the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark on television and put the two things equating to each other of like, okay, that's how they did that, right? And this is what these people do. And oh my God, that looks like the best job in the world. It feels like a bit of a cliche when you've heard, J.J. Abrams and Spielberg and everybody tell the same story, but it's true. It's like, well, that's where we started out. We started making Super 8 movies and editing them and putting music to them and stuff. And from there, that led me to art college and then to film school. That's when I set out to make Dog Soldiers. I didn't know it was going to take 6 years to finally get it made, but I was 25 when I started. I was shooting it, when I was 31. It came out when I was 32. And at no point did I ever think it wasn't going to get made. I was like so focused. It's just being stubborn. I think the advice is that, everyone has a movie camera in their pocket these days, and like it can film 4K. And it can film high resolution. It's great little cameras. There's editing software is not that expensive. You can edit on your laptop now. If you want to be a filmmaker, make films. I wouldn't necessarily say go to film school. I would say, get a job on a crew, get crewing up, get practical, practical experience. If you want to be a director, the forums are there. You can make a film, stick it on YouTube, and there's nothing to stop you from doing that, other than your own creativity. And we didn't have that, so everybody's got a bit of an advantage now, so they just got to crack on and do it. It was an incredible experience. I mean, working on West, I got to direct Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris and just amazing actors like that I might never have got the chance to. I got to do a Western. I'd never got a chance to. I've always loved Westerns. Got to do a Western and some sci-fi. Game of Thrones, obviously, when I came in on season 2, it wasn't quite the quite what it became as far as just being a cultural phenomenon. By the time season 4 rolled around for my second episode, it definitely was. And it was an astonishing experience. Everyone was so welcoming to directors. They wanted our ideas. They wanted creative input. So, but TV, the difference with TV, as I say, is you park your ego at the door, because you're not there it's not your baby, it's somebody else's baby. And unlike a feature, which like you spend a year on, and it's your baby, and you eat, you sleep, you breathe this thing for a whole year or more. Whereas the TV things, you kind of go in, you do the best job possible, you go there as a director, you direct the shit out of it, and then you leave and you don't see it again until it's broadcast, essentially. There's a certain relief to that, of like, you're just focusing on the one job and trying to do the best job possible for whoever's baby it is. And then you might get to do 4 shows a year. So as opposed to one feature, you can do 4 different shows, and those shows might be like a Black Sails, it was pirates. Game of Thrones, it's fantasy. Then I might do Hannibal, then I might do Constantine, or I might do Westworld. And you're jumping between genres and places and things. So it's super exciting. It's a really great sphere to work in. And I want to keep up working in the TV space. It's just that now I kind of want to create my own TV shows. So The Lair's coming out in January in the UK. It's definitely coming out on Shudder. It's very much kind of going back to my roots a lot. People have compared it to Dog Soldiers, and I say it's a distant cousin to Dog Soldiers. It falls into the same kind of genre or subgenre as Predator and Dog Soldiers and Aliens, in that it's the soldiers versus something. And certainly I wanted to get a sense of humor back into it, because my last film, The Reckoning, was, although I'm very proud of it, it was quite, it was quite worthy. I was trying to be quite worthy and have a message to it. And I think that message was very potent, if not necessarily well received. But this time I just set out to make a fun movie that was just entertaining, action-packed, full of monsters and gore and good one-liners and good characters. And that was the agenda.